This weekend is the 40th anniversary of Scientology Cult's International Association of Scientologists, and they're holding a big event at Saint Hill Manor in England. Well, I'm going to tell you about the beginnings of the International Association of Scientology, how it was a tax shelter for Scientology, and also, if you stay to the end, you'll learn about my personal connection to that anniversary date. Stay tuned. Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Fisher. Welcome to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion, where we tell the stories about Scientology, its history, its abuses, and tell personal stories. And I want to invite everybody, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit the notification button, because it helps get this message out to other people on the internet who might be interested in finding out about the secrets of Scientology. Anyway, this weekend is the 40th anniversary of the International Association of Scientologists, otherwise known as the IAS, and is referred to as the IAS all the time. I wanted to tell you about the beginnings of the International Association of Scientologists because I was there. I was around, and I was there when the idea first came up and the creation of the IAS. Here's how it all started. In 1984, I was working for David Miscavige as in charge of his office up at the Gold Base. I was called the corporate liaison in charge, and my duties involved taking care of his needs up at the Gold Base, which was in Gilman Hot Springs, and also to have an office in Los Angeles to help him because he was still the chairman of the board of Author Services Incorporated, and that was L. Ron Hubbard's for-profit corporation that was located in Hollywood to, create income for Hubbard through his books, movies, personal investments, things like that. So I had an office out there in California, and then I also had one up at the international base. And my job was basically to be the liaison into the Church of Scientology because I was a Sea Org member and a paid member of the Church of Scientology, whereas Author Services was a separate corporation for profit. And so Hubbard wanted Scientology to pay for a lot of the things that Author Services did because they worked hand in hand and ordered into Scientology all the time in order to further L. Ron Hubbard's personal fortune and personal gains. So I happened to be in Los Angeles at the time at their old offices. Author Services offices used to be on Sunset Boulevard, and I was out there doing some work for Miscavige, and I was there, and he wanted me to come into the conference room at ASI, Author Services, for a special meeting. And I wasn't the only one there. Vicky Asnaran and Jesse Prince were there from the Religious Technology Center at the time. They were in charge. Mark Yeager was there. He was the commanding officer of the Commoner's Messenger organization and also the Watchdog Committee chairman. And then also there were various executives from Author Services, people in charge of the L. Ron Hubbard's financial affairs, legal affairs. David Miscavige was there. Shelley Miscavige was there. And then also attorneys were there for L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. And we met in the big conference room there at ASI. And the subject was about setting up an organization that basically they could use as a tax shelter for money that would be away from off the coast of the United States, so that the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, or anybody who were filing lawsuits could not get their hands on the money of Scientology, the reserves of Scientology. Now, at that time, Scientology's reserves was called Sea Organization Reserves, SOR. It was called SOR. And it was a little over $300 million, including the value of the real estate that they owned at the time. And Scientology was under investigation by the Internal Revenue Service, and so was L. Ron Hubbard, because the IRS felt that there were Hubbard was criminally involved with the church, and that he was siphoning money from the church into his own personal fortune. It's called inurement. And so they were investigating him. They were investigating David Miscavige and other people at Author Services regarding this. There was a criminal investigation going on. Also, at the same time, there were lawsuits that were going on where people were suing Scientology for the harm and the abuses that were done against them. The most famous at the time was Julie Christopherson up in Portland, Oregon, who was suing Scientology. And then also Lawrence Wallersheim, Larry Wallersheim, who we've interviewed on our channel, was also suing Scientology at the time. And large judgments were being gotten, eventually were gotten by these people who were suing Scientology against Scientology, and they would have to have the money in order to be able to pay for it. So Sea Org Reserves, or Scientology's Reserves, was basically being built up in case the IRS decided, oh, you need to pay a huge fine, because Hubbard was concerned that it would wipe out Scientology if that happened, if they were determined not to be tax exempt, or if they were criminally liable, that it would basically wipe out their finances. So that's why there was a big push in Scientology organizations for gross income. And the money then was siphoned from the organizations and the missions up to SOR, Sea Org Reserves. And that was where most of the money went that was earned by Scientology after, local expenses. But that's why staff members never got paid very much at the local organizations, because the flag banking officer in the organization would siphon up any extra money and send it to what was called SOR. And it was determined the greatest good. The greatest good was actually the greatest good for L. Ron Hubbard, to protect him and also to protect the mother church of Scientology. So there was no money to pay staff, because they were taking it all and putting it into the reserves and trying to build it up in order to fight off the IRS and fight off these lawsuits. Well, at this meeting at Author Services, there was a tax attorney there. His name was Chris Cobb, and he presented the idea of setting up an association offshore. And what he mentioned was that there was, back in 1978 and the early 80s, basically a nonprofit set up called the Safe Environment Fund. And the Safe Environment Fund was to raise donations to defend Mary Sue Hubbard and the different defendants in the Snow White case, where they had spies, people, infiltrate the United States government and steal documents from the government regarding Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. And this is a famous case. The FBI raided Scientology's premises, both in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., in the mid-1970s. And Mary Sue Hubbard and various defendants, I think it was 8 or 9 defendants in Scientology, they all eventually ended up pleading guilty to some lesser charges. They did a plea agreement because they did not want to have a trial. But you can actually see, basically, if you look up Snow White, you can see what they basically admitted to as terms of what was done as far as infiltrating the United States government. But anyway, back to the Safe Environment Fund. This was set up so people could actually donate money to the legal defense of Mary Sue Hubbard and the different defendants who were being charged criminally by the Federal Bureau of Investigations in the United States. And they raised a lot of money through donations from different Scientology parishioners, different people, staff members. They used to try and collect money from us out of our $17.20 a week pay. There would be somebody there from the Guardian's office trying to get us to donate $5, $10 each week to the Safe Environment Fund. Well, the reason that he brought up the Safe Environment Fund, Chris Cobb, the attorney, was because he said that even though the case was over and Mary Sue and the people had gone to jail, that no one had ever requested a refund or repayment who had donated money to the Safe Environment Fund. And his idea was we should set up an offshore association where people could donate money and become members of the Church of Scientology International. And that's what happened. It was decided at this meeting that they were going to set up an association which became the International Association of Scientologists. And it was going to be set up offshore, not in the United States, for tax purposes, where they could then channel and funnel money from different organizations into these accounts offshore in the Caribbean, in Luxembourg, and in Europe, and the money would, quote unquote, be safe in case of any large judgments that might occur. And that was the purpose of setting up the IAS. That was the real purpose as to why they did it, was set it up as a tax shelter. So anyway, this happened in like very quickly. It was like the late summer, early fall of 1984. And they organized it up so that they would have an event in Saint Hill Manor, which was L. Ron Hubbard's home in London, England, as the home of Hubbard and the Mother Church. And they would bring basically representatives from the Scientology churches and organizations from all over the world to have a conference and get together. So this was all done at the end of October 1984. These are the attendees of the International Association of Scientologists Establishment Conference. And what they did was they basically signed a pledge, almost like a Declaration of Independence, stating that, Scientology and other religions were being attacked by governments all over the world, and that they believed in freedom of religion, and that they should be able to, have tax exempt status and not be under attack from different areas and stuff like that. And because of that, they basically were going to form up an association of Scientologists that would be what their purpose would be, to fight that and to fight against those abuses and that type of thing. So these are the people that were there, and they all signed it. They had a big signing in L. Ron Hubbard's office at Saint Hill Manor, each individually signing for the different, saying that they were signing on to this association. This photo is taken outside of Saint Hill Manor, and the gentleman that is right in the front there with the dark suit, red tie, mustache, and hair is David Miscavige. And this is October 1984. And he's 22, maybe 23 years old at this time. And that's him right there in the front. Other people that are there is all the way over to the left of your screen in the front row is Guillaume Lasarve, who was the executive director international. Behind him with the mustache was Ray Midoff, who was the senior case supervisor international. And behind Ray in the very back with the gray suit and the gray hair is Heber Jentzsch, who was the president of the Church of Scientology. They're all there. Next to Guillaume on the inside in the black suit, the woman there, that's Vicky Asnaran, who was the inspector general, the deputy inspector general for the Religious Technology Center. And then off to her right with the mustache and the sort of the white shirt or whatever, that's Lyman Spurlock, and he was the legal and financial person in charge of Author Services Incorporated, and he dealt with a lot of the taxes and that type of thing, and that's Lyman Spurlock there. And then the rest of the people there's some others that I recognize, but they were basically Sea Org members brought from other organizations from Europe and Australia and that type of thing. Standing to the left of David Miscavige, or to the left, in the picture of David Miscavige there in the beige jacket and pants, that's Kenny Lipton, who was from Los Angeles, and he was a good friend of ours later on. But anyway, so these people all met, and this was in October of 1984, and signed basically that declaration establishing the International Association of Scientologists. And here is the logo for the International Association of Scientologists that was there. So what did that mean? All right, all of a sudden they need to set up an organization offshore and get, a place where they could actually have the people work and be out of the control of the United States government. And so what did they decide to do? They decided that we needed to buy a ship, and a ship could be offshore and not in the United States. And so a mission was fired to purchase what eventually became the Free Winds, and this is the ship there that they purchased. And it took a couple of years to raise the money and to actually purchase the ship, get it renovated, get the crew manned, and that type of thing. And a lot of you have already heard the stories about the Free Winds. And eventually OT-8 it was announced to deliver there. But that was not the purpose of the Free Winds initially. The purpose of getting the ship in the Free Winds was having a place for the International Association of Scientologists, so that they were not located physically in the United States at the time, and that they were away from the US government, the IRS, and that type of thing. But that's why initially why they got the Free Winds. Other things that they did was, all of a sudden it became a membership organization for Scientologists. If you wanted to do any Scientology training or auditing, you had to become a member of the International Association of Scientologists. And they gave you this card, which was like a credit card with your name and your number, and whether or not you were an annual member or a lifetime member. And Sea Org members were automatically given lifetime membership. And so you had your card and you had to present that. And there was supposed to be little discounts and things like that for services and books if you were a member of the International Association of Scientologists. But that was the initial thing that they did. Later, they came up with pins like this one here for patrons. And I'll get into patrons and who they were, but this is a diamond encrusted gold pin that people could wear on their lapels, public Scientologists, to let people know that you were a member of the International Association of Scientologists. This is a fancy one for people who donate a lot of money years later. But anyway, just wanted to show you that. They also started putting out a magazine called Impact. And they put out a magazine, I don't know if it was monthly or if it was every 3 months, but basically it was a promotion for the International Association of Scientologists, the good works that were being done by them. It was a bunch of public relations PR BS to promote to people about how great the International Association of Scientologists were, and to promote people becoming members. Now, at the time, in the early to mid 1980s, I'm going to tell you a story about what was going on. I was in the Sea Organization, like I said, up at the Gold Base, and this is before L. Ron Hubbard died. And David Miscavige, Mark Yeager, and different executives up there, they were gun owners and they loved their guns, and they would go out shooting up in the desert. And then there was also a rifle range behind L. Ron Hubbard's home at the Gold Base called Bonneview. And so they had guns, shotguns, rifles, pistols, you name it. And so they all became members of the National Rifle Association, the NRA, here in the United States. And they encouraged other people to join the NRA. And I joined the NRA because you got a free magazine and some other stuff. I never owned a gun in my life, and I still never have. But basically, they all joined the National Rifle Association. Okay. Well, the National Rifle Association, they had a magazine that came out, and you got it every month for free as being a member. And one of the things that Miscavige spotted and Mark Yeager spotted in the magazine for the NRA was advertisements like the following. This is a photograph of Tom Selleck, and it's Tom Selleck talking about Second Amendment rights, the right to bear arms here in the United States, and that he's a proud gun owner. And at the very end, it goes, "I'm the NRA," and it has a signature, Tom Selleck. Well, they loved this idea and decided that they were going to basically co-opt it for the International Association of Scientologists. So in that Impact magazine, they started running advertisements, full page advertisements or whatever, a photograph of some famous Scientologist or whatever, and did the same thing about how great the IAS was and the good work they were doing, and that I am the IAS. And that was totally stolen from the National Rifle Association. Here you can see, this is a later photo many years later of Miscavige with some of the donors or Freedom Medal winners, and it says, "We are the IAS," and that became basically how they branded that. And that all came from the National Rifle Association at the time and the advertising that was being done. The other thing they decided to do was to have an annual event at Saint Hill in the London, in the United Kingdom, to basically each year call together the people who would join the IAS, and they decided they were going to give away prizes to and donate money to different causes, humanitarian causes, things like that. But they were going to recognize people as Freedom Medal winners from the IAS, and they would be awarded, and there would be a big banquet in the UK. And this is an example one years later. This is, I think, is a guy from the Nation of Islam. I don't know his name. Not sure who he is exactly. But basically, they would not just award them to Scientologists, but they would award them to other people who were fighting religious intolerance around the world. And so they would give them these medals like they were Olympic medal size, and that became the focus of these IAS events every October in England. And of course, they would also get people to join and raise some money. Now, the big time money raising, the IAS became all about money. Okay. Not only did the Scientology move funds over into the International Association of Scientologists, like I said, to protect them because they did not have IRS tax exemption at the time as a religion, but it became important to get more and more and more money. All right. So they started getting salespeople or registrars or field disseminators. Here's an advertisement, a recent one in an Impact magazine. And this gentleman here says, join the active team, become an IAS field disseminator. And who these people are basically registrars. They're salespeople, car salesmen for the IAS. And they go around and they get people not only to join the IAS, but to donate large sums of money to the IAS to further their causes and that type of thing. And they get paid commissions based off of the money that they raise for the IAS. And it can be tens of millions of dollars. Okay. And so the focus after 1990, when I left the Sea Organization and no longer worked for Miscavige, Scientology got their IRS tax exemption, I think in 1993 or whatever. And all of a sudden, they paid their little fine that they had to pay to the IRS. And then after a couple of years or whatever of the IRS examining their books each year and making sure everything was okay and hunky-dory, it then was no holds barred. They could do whatever they wanted and not worry about the IRS because they had tax exemption status in the United States as a church, as a religion. And so they started really, really ramping up the donations to the International Association of Scientologists. All right. And when I say really, we're talking about getting people to donate. And they developed, prior to the IRS exemption, but they developed different donation levels where you would get trophies and get acknowledged at the IAS event in England in October. And this, become an IAS patron. Okay, a patron. I don't know how much money it was. I think initially it was $10,000. Maybe it was $100,000, but it was a lot of money at the time. And now people have donated millions and tens of millions of dollars. This woman here, I think in this photograph, is Trish Dugan, and her husband, they've donated over $350 million to the IAS, which is basically Scientology and their war chest. Okay. Now, when I left Scientology and the Sea Organization in 1990, in the Sea Org Reserves, which I told you before, SOR, there was about $350 to $370 million in that Sea Org Reserves. When Hubbard died, he had $250 million of his own personal money that was going to go into the Church of Spiritual Technology once they got IRS tax exemption. But anyway, that's all the money that they had. Once the IRS tax exemption went through, they could raise all sorts of money. And then, like I said, they raised tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's reported now that Scientology has over $3 or $4 billion in net worth. Okay. The other interesting thing about the Sea Org Reserves and the money, David Miscavige wanted to get paid when he was in Religious Technology Center when I worked for him. And basically, he made his statistic, which would generate, what his bonuses were based off of and whether or not he was upstat and could take liberty, was on the increase in Sea Org Reserves each week. So if the Sea Org Reserves went up, he was upstat. If it went down, he was downstat. Of course, it never went down. And one of the ways that they made sure that it went up is that they included in that Sea Org Reserves the value of all the real estate that they owned around the world for Scientology, all the organizations and buildings and stuff. So they would constantly on a regular basis get them reappraised and, get them higher value because that would raise the statistic and raise the value, right? So they've raised millions and millions and millions of dollars. And then after the IRS tax exemption happened, what do? Miscavige needed something to show the IRS that he was actually utilizing the funds in such a way to expand Scientology. But no, he didn't get more people into Scientology. He just bought up buildings and real estate all over Hollywood and all over the world, which later became his ideal organizations. And many of them just sit there empty. They've never been renovated. Nothing's ever happened. And how do they get renovated? They make the Scientology public, who are still around, donate the money for it. They don't pay for it out of the money that's been donated to Scientology. They don't do that. They make them donate on top of that in order to build out their building that Scientology has bought for that area. Okay, so it's just a complete and utter money-making scam. Not only that, there was the whole period where they were getting people to take out second mortgages on their homes, run up their credit cards, get credit cards in people's names without them knowing it. And many of you may know of that as the Chase, whatever it was, the credit card fraud that was going on, which they had to stop eventually because they basically were just stealing money and putting it into these reserves and stuff, right? So it just became a money-making racket. So that David Miscavige, right here, you see him right here with Nancy Cartwright, the voice of Bart Simpson, and she's being awarded this huge trophy, bowling trophy, at one of the events because she donated a huge sum of money to the International Association of Scientologists or to the Valley organization in the San Fernando Valley or whatever it was. And so she got her picture taken with David Miscavige, okay? And that became basically a status symbol in Scientology, and it is still to this day. They have what they call the Patrons Ball at this event in October every year in the UK, and you have to be a patron in order to attend it. It's a black tie event with big entertainment, and Miscavige is there, and it's a big deal, and it's basically just a big status situation. But then, of course, the biggest and most famous thing that happened there at the IAS event was several years ago when Tom Cruise was there and David Miscavige created this award of the Freedom Medal of Valor, which is about the size of a Flava Flav alarm clock, a hubcap, and awarded it to him for becoming the most dedicated Scientologist I know, right? Not the Sea Org members and the people who were sacrificing and signed billionaire contracts. No, it's Tom Cruise, who makes millions and millions and millions of dollars, okay, doing movies and that type of thing, who doesn't pay for services. His family and all that get free services. Just watch some of the interviews with Matt Pesch, who was the Treasury Secretary at Flag. And, he gets all this free service, but he's just a big PR person. And so Miscavige did this. And, of course, it became world famous all over the world, the little video that Tom Cruise did about how great Scientology was, and we're going to shatter suppression and all that. So that's like their big calling card at the International Association of Scientologists, is how can we get more money out of people? Meanwhile, Scientology is shrinking all over the internet. We have YouTube channels like mine and others that are disclosing and the abuses and the real truths about Scientology. And they're getting less and less people in than the heyday in the 1970s and the 1980s when they were all over the world. Okay. And meanwhile, what they do is they suck up to these people who are donating money at these events and tell them a whole, public relation PR BS story about all the expansion that's going on worldwide and the new ideal organization that's been opened up in Zimbabwe or wherever it is, and just to get people to donate more and more money. And it's sheep basically going to the slaughter. At any rate, like I said, this weekend is the 40th anniversary of the IAS, and these are the tents that have been erected on the Saint Hill Manor grounds for the event. where they're going to have, the patrons ball and all that sort of thing. So, it's coming up this weekend, and I just wanted to mention that. Here's a picture from, I think, last year or the year before of the people inside. But I can tell you right now, it's been looked at, and these photos are photoshopped. There's not this many people in there. They computer generate and put in a lot of extra people into these photographs. But that's the International Association of Scientologists and what's going on. And it was all set up originally as a tax shelter to protect L. Ron Hubbard, Scientology, and it was based on the idea of trying to protect Mary Sue Hubbard and the various criminals who broke into the U.S. government under the Snow White program. And that's how the IAS, the International Association of Scientologists, that's how it all began back in 1984. Now, I told you that there was a personal attachment for me that actually is coincidental to this date, the establishment of the IAS 40 years ago. And that happened to be my wedding date when I was in the Sea Organization. I got married on the same day that the IAS was established 40 years ago. And this is me marrying my wife at the time, Julie Catano. And we had our wedding on the Star of California at Gilman Hot Springs. Now, I'm showing you this picture of the wedding party because the wedding party was supposed to include David Miscavige as the minister, Mark Yeager as one of my groomsmen, and Jesse Prince, who is there, he is still there, right? But because of this setup of the IAS, which only just, happened maybe a month or two before they had the October setup, they all had to cancel out of my wedding because obviously setting up the IAS was more important. And so they left to go to England. And so I had to get replacements for my minister and some of my groomsmen. But that is my wedding day 40 years ago to Julie at the secret base at Gilman Hot Springs. And it happens to be the same day that they established the International Association of Scientologists. Now, unfortunately, I'm not married anymore. I was married to Julie for almost 6.5 years. And when I left in 1990 and had to escape, she would not leave with me. And it's a shame because all these years later, she's still there. She's still in Scientology, still in the Sea Organization. She's probably 65 years old now, 64, 65 years old, and doing whatever busy work that they have them doing up at the Gold Base. And she never left. She's still there. And she would not leave with me. So that's what happened and regarding that. So what is being done about the International Association of Scientologists? Well, many of you may know that Apostate Alex, who has his own channel, that's a photograph of him this week out in front of Saint Hill. And he organized last year a protest in front of Saint Hill on the streets right out front of Saint Hill during the IAS event. Here they are last year, protesting against the abuses of Scientology. And Alex is like a pit bull. He's doing it again this year, and they're having another march tomorrow there in front of Saint Hill. And Scientology is now fighting him tooth and nail to try and stop and suppress the people protesting against them. But, Alex, my hat's off to you. I mean, he has tremendous intention. And he sticks to it, and there's no benefit to him financially or anything like that. He just believes that the abuses of Scientology need to be called out and they need to be stopped. So my hat's off to Apostate Alex and all the people that are going to be there protesting against the International Association of Scientologists and the different abuses that are going on. So that's my story today, people. I hope you found it valuable, informative. Please subscribe to my channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. Janice is still on her cruise through the Panama Canal. They're actually down through Mexico and now down to Costa Rica, and she'll be gone for another couple of weeks, and then she'll be back. But hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit the notification button. If you've got any questions or comments about this story or anything else about my channel, please go down below and ask down there. I read them all and I do respond. You can also support our channel. You can buy me a coffee. There's a link on our YouTube page, and also down below in the description on the video. You can click on that and you can buy me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, how many ever coffees you want to buy me. I really appreciate the support. And then also, if you'd like to become a member of my channel of Scientology Peeling the Onion, right next to the subscribe button, there's a button that says join on our YouTube page. Click on that. There's a short video that describes the different membership levels, and that's another way that you can support the channel. And if you become our top of the line Peeling Master membership, you get an autographed copy of Janice's book, and there's other perks involved with it too. So if you want to become a member, hit that join button. And we, again, really, really appreciate the support. That's the show. I hope you found it informative. I have more shows coming up here in the next couple of weeks. As always, we appreciate you watching. And until next time, everybody, bye-bye. We'll see you later.